of getting to meet Kelly because she was like very dedicated member of the wing, and it had
Yeah.
started Lex like at the wing, and was always like there really early to like get get the really good seat. And she was a sort of unconventional founder like me and didn't come from like a career in business or from McKinsey or things like that. And so I was just really blown away by what the like early traction that she was seeing. And I think Charlie, like your point about kind of reverse engineering from the A and from what your next pitch is going to be was really important, because it was sort of like, what are you going to use this money for? What are you going to be able to do with this money that you would not have been able to do without it, to grow this business? And so I think getting really specific around that was key. I think also like knowing that a lot of the people that like Kelly was going to be speaking to and pitching were not necessarily going to be like users of Lex and like, members of the queer community. I think it was really important to like demonstrate the kind of astronomical growth and, growth in, volume and influence and all these different things that, we're seeing in the world demographically, and the growth potential for this platform. And then also, it was really like one of the things I was so blown away by was like there were, the beta had been, released like for, 2 weeks at that point or something when we like sat down together. But it was, there were users in like Russia and in India. And I was just like, this is insane. Like I was like, you need to have like a map with like all the places that these users are coming from, because this is just like, this is incredible. And yeah, and I think the challenge was having to really demonstrate to probably an audience that was not going to really understand, was going to think about this demographic as marginal, to really demonstrate empirically that they weren't and they aren't, and then also just to show organically the amount of growth that she'd seen already. The other thing was that I think like it's with really amazing businesses, sometimes it's like that founder is the only, like you were put on this earth to do this thing. Like there's no one else that can do this thing in the way that you can. And that is certainly the case, with Kelly. And I think showing like, this is why, like I as a founder am like uniquely, these are my like unfair advantages essentially that I have, that's going to be able to take this business from like 0 to 100. And she had so many of those. It was so important to demonstrate that, and sort of give voice to that. So I hope that answers. Were there other things we did?
No, I just like vividly remember us sitting down and working on the deck, and then you making the map and then showing all the use cases. Yeah, but again, saying that I really did have to set out to educate the audience about queer community and use the right kind of dumb it down for the audience, but it really helped. And then also just like on the other side of it, I would meet some of the people that Audrey introduced me to at the very beginning, like I'm blanking. Starts with an A. Lee.
Aileen?
No.
Cowboy? No.
No. Man.
Albert.
Albert Lee. Yeah, I kept thinking Arthur, but Arthur was able to give me, or Albert was able to like give me some of the jargon I actually needed to like make myself feel more legit in the eyes of the investors, like the wedge into the market as dating. Never heard of the wedge before. But that really helped. And then basically really what we were seeing also in that first month were people using Lex for so many more reasons than dating, to find friends, housing, advice, book clubs, sports teams. So we really just wanted to show that what we were building is actually, forget about the dating, this is queer social network. We'll always have that aspect. It's kind of a fluid nature of queer relationships as well. But because there was some like but against like, well, what if the people like find their person and then leave the product, they're not going to come back. But here we show that you will just come here because you can find your queer wedding photographer. You can just find all aspects of your queer life, like, and that's what really got the first investor in the door with Female Founders Fund. That's our lead investor. They really saw the potential there as this greater social network for what people think is a niche audience, but also it's okay to build for smaller audiences that are super, super into something. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you, Audrey.
That was not planned, by the way. I just happened to be texting Audrey on the side, and I was like, "Hey, by the way, you just got your name dropped." So I didn't even know the backstory before that when she came up. So so now we're at sort of pitching, and we're starting to talk about leads. But Ben, I'll go back to you for a moment. Can you tell us about the numbers? Like you said, you went out to raise, and the larger round didn't work, and then maybe you got something smaller. How many people did you pitch initially, and how did you make that list?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, again, for future founders in the room right now, I will say fundraising is a soul-crushing experience, and you have to be very robust. Well, at least in my experience, and I think the numbers bear it out, that you're going to get a lot of no's. I think in that first tranche of going out with for a seed, I think we spoke to maybe 70 funds or something like that, and essentially some interest, some this is cool. I won't lead around, but I definitely partake. If you get a lead, let us know. Some of that genuine, some of it not so genuine. There's a lot of VCEs, like fake speak you have to untangle in this, but I think 70 funds and no lead out of that. And then next time around, we were a bit more successful with a more targeted approach. But as Charlie said at the start, the reason is usually, or people say the reason is usually the VCs. There is something to that in that you have to target you have to do your research up front as to, and this is what we learned in the second approach. Even generalist VCs aren't really generalist. If you take a look at their, the investments they've made, they have preferences and some things they have never invested in a particular area before. So Crunchbase is a great resource to go and see where investors have invested. You can build up pretty good understanding of, for each investor, what their areas of interest are, and start to triangulate in. And so that's a lot of Crunchbase in terms of getting the intros. That's a kind of different conversation. But then you've got to start circulating among your network. Hey, I'm interested in chatting with this person at this fund. Do you have an in? You can also look at again, kind of via Crunchbase or something like it. If there's a company that's a bit like yours, maybe from there are waves of investment. So 5-6 years ago, there were other companies doing something similar to us. You could look at the investors that invested in those kind of companies, and get it. I mean, those funds have probably actually migrated. I mean, maybe they were seed funds back then. Now they're Series A funds. That's a different problem. But yeah, I think Crunchbase and networking are the kind of the best ways to build that list.
Given that number of investors, looking back, did you ever sort of overspend time with anybody, and what were sort of the signals as you kind of look back on, like now that I think about it, it was that this person did X and that really meant they were interested, and this other person, I spent way too much time, and honestly, this is what should have told me they weren't interested?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's maybe a little self-confident, but I guess now I get a much better sense from the first meeting. I don't know I can't really distill what the signals are, but you said if you're having to educate the investor about the problem you're working on, that's probably a bad sign, right? The ones who are interested, maybe they're faking up front, but by the end of the meeting, actually these people really know their space and they're just testing, do I understand the problem? If you're spending most of the meeting like arguing about TAM or arguing about the way you're going to enter the market, I think that's a sign that they're not really interested. So I think probably we spend a little bit too much time trying to think we can convince people. If they're not really into you through, and you get that feeling from the first meeting, then they're not into you. And the thing, even if they say follow up or keep us informed or whatever, just write them off and move on to the next person. That was kind of my rule of thumb.
So Kelly, would you agree with that? I mean, I know, as Audrey said, you probably weren't necessarily pitching people who knew the queer community as well as you might have, but would you agree with the idea that the people who wound up investing, even though they weren't necessarily part of it, for some reason didn't need to be educated about it, and it was easy, it wasn't as much convincing? Or do you feel like you pushed them over the top and convinced the people who said yes?
I don't think I necessarily had to convince the people that said yes so much about the need for this and for this community. But I will say, like, some of the people I spent a lot of time with that I thought was leading in the right direction, some of the people were from the community and like it really, so in the end, like, it didn't necessarily mean like if you're like a gay person you're gonna get it and invest. Like, that rule is just like out the door. It really just depends on how the story hits you. If they're interested in this kind of product, they understand what you're building and believe in that you can do it, that kind of spoke more than, if the person really got the community. Even if they were inside the community, it didn't necessarily, I was getting a green light just because of that.
To date, I have not invested in any hair replacement product, nor any cycling related product, and I get pitched all of them. So I understand how founders can sometimes think that, and it's not always the case.
Right.
Stephany, when you wound up, correct me if I'm wrong, getting a lead from who you got the pre-seed, correct?
No.
Oh, okay. So how did that work out? You raised a pre-seed round and then your lead came from somewhere else. So how many people did you wind up pitching, and how did that funnel wind up narrowing?
Yeah, I think my story will feel a little different than some, because that pre-seed check came from someone who, and I think when you take pre-seed, even if it's relatively small, the unlock can be that person that fund will push you forward in the system, right? So, I don't remember the exact number, but what happened is, we waited, right? We were going to fundraise. We were like, COVID hit. We were like, oh boy, like, because the plan had been like, we have enough cash till X, and like, we're going to fundraise and it'll be fine, right? This is like a thing you have to really be aware of, black swan events. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, the world's crashing down, like, cut everybody down. So like let's go build a budget that's going to get us to the end of the year, so that if we can't fundraise, we can survive. So that's like step one. And then, step two was like, when should we fundraise? Because, there's cyclical seasonality to it. Nobody ever closes around in August because venture closes down. Okay, but it wasn't August yet. And so we really had to kind of like first pick like our territory. And what I found for me, and I think this is a little bit unique, is that we started to have maybe one or two, hey, we're gonna go fundraise, we'd love your feedback convos, kind of like what Kelly said about getting feedback from a fellow founder, but these were with venture funds where I had relationships. Like, I'd love your feedback on my pitch so I can be smart in the room, led to, you're raising, wait, let's talk. And that doesn't always happen, but it's similar like in customer discovery. I bet, Ben, you felt this. You like go want to research, product needs for a customer, and they're like, wait, you're building that thing? Like, can we be customers? So sometimes that does work out. The like soft sound, would you mind just giving me your feedback? And that just sort of tripped a wire in the system. I think we did our fundraising the first week of May. So we've been in COVID long enough that the venture funds had like realized that they were going to have to start taking pitches on Zoom. And from almost every fund I talked to, I was one of the very few first founders they'd ever done on Zoom. So I was in this weird territory where it's like, we haven't done this before, partner meeting, we're gonna see how it goes. Like, so I think there was definitely a lot of dynamics going on. But we talked to, it moved quickly and we got term sheets very quickly, and then we got oversubscribed very quickly. So we actually didn't have the like funnel narrowing process in the traditional sense. What we had, which does happen, and you should know about, is an overwhelming sense of interest in which you have multiple term sheets and extraordinary pressure to react to under a very tight timeline. And while that sounds amazing, and I am grateful to the end of the earth for the experience I've had, there is a different flavor of sort of stress and analysis that goes into how do I make my decision so rapidly? I think what happened in that moment in venture was that a few deals suddenly looked like they needed to get funded quickly, and all people had spare time. Literally, people were like, "Oh, you want to meet now?" And I was like, "No, I thought you'd want to meet in like a few weeks." So the world was a little bit different then. And as we got, multiple term sheets and all the things started happening, we had to make some very quick decisions about like who was going to be the right investor. And for me, it's very personal. The fund has very little to do with it, but I chose my investors based on stage. So I went very specifically to market to look for seed stage investors. I did not want to check from Sequoia, even though that's like an amazing hallmark brand, because I needed somebody who was going to sit in the room with me every week, take my calls at midnight, and sit on my board at the stage in which the company is still just an idea. So I looked very specifically at stage and very specifically at my niche, which was a combination of B2B and payments infrastructure. And so that diversified us away from our first check, which was from a generalist fund, Inspired Capital, and into a lead investor, Homebrew, who had written early checks into Plaid, into Phoenix, into Chime, into companies that were in the same space, that had the same challenges at seed that we were going to have, that was investing in companies already that would be counterparties, beneficial tools for us to use, and that just really had a very strong perspective on what we were going to need to get done at this moment in time for the company. And so, by definition, there were a lot of conversations. And as Ben said, and as Kelly said, like, you have to quickly decide, like, is it worth continuing this one? And can I get them over the hump? And I find that funds are getting better, frankly, at saying no after first meetings. It is really like very hard when things get drawn out because they're just not sure. And I'm finding funds are getting much better. And I always ask for feedback. Would you mind calling me for 15 minutes? And I'm always very grateful, as I know everyone would be, but you have to really go with grace. We despite being oversubscribed, we got turned down, and you still feel shitty. Despite having a term sheet, your heart gets broken, your feelings get hurt, but you have to really listen and be able to. First of all, venture is very small, despite there seeming to be like an infinite number of people that reach out. Like, it's a small interconnected world. And I found that I was able to get really good information that helped me substantially in further conversations, because some people declined right away, right? First convo, they were out. And like, what was it that made them jump out so quickly? What had I done wrong, right? And just understanding where, one of the things that had come out was like how fresh the team was, and people were worried about that, or the fact that some of us hadn't met because of COVID, people were worried about that. So trying to make sure you stay away from those things because they weren't material to our success and haven't been. It's a deeply emotional roller coaster. And even when you get a yes, the no's still hurt. They still make you question, can I get back up there? And can I do it again? And I found, for me, making sure going into fundraising, I was prepared for the entire process, which isn't just the pitch. Remember, the pitch is the step one of the diligence that's going to be an onslaught while you're still pitching new people. And then they're going to start diligence, which is another onslaught. And like, if you have 3 or 4 of those happening at the same time, you are buried. How do you make sure that you are responsive? How do you make sure you get all the work done? How can you prep in advance? Knowing that there was going to be an investment memo needed, we pre-write our investment memos so that we can essentially turn over our version of why you should invest in memo format at the end, like make it easy for the partner. We did extensive preparation. My advice is always, if you get an email like during diligence, don't just reply with the first thing that comes to mind. Like, that is a very important email. There is more to that question than you can possibly imagine. Step back, call your advisors, write that in Google Docs read it 20 times, think about the answer, and think about you are selling until the day the round closes. And anything could happen. You can get a term sheet and there are still, things that can go wrong. So like stay very buttoned up and very focused is what I found to be like, just get through it.
What was the timing from first term sheet to money in the bank?
That's a great question. In the seed, the turnaround time was about 6 or 8 weeks. Right. So that is pressure, right? And you've now been out of your business, your day-to-day, which remember as a founder, the sun revolves around you. You've been out of the business, you've been very focused, your team's been distracted. So what have you built? Probably not a lot, depending on how long this took. And then, yeah, there's like all the closing stuff that I think, honestly, like people prepare you okay for going out and pitching. I don't think they prepare you for what's next. And there's a lot in there. There's a lot of decisions that if you don't have great counsel or you've not done this before, it could really change how the board gets structured, what your voting rights are, what happens if, there's a down round, or like many parameters that you like have to think about. And there's a lot of back and forth, and there's just a lot of legal effort I found in that process that continues to stress maybe only the founder. And, in my experience, don't accelerate hiring until the round closes. Don't go spend money you've not received yet because there is risk. I hate to say it, but there's absolutely risk that for some black swan reason, that round won't close. You cannot get to terms on something. Some, issue could happen, a data breach on your platform while you're in term sheets, anything can go wrong. So trying to shorten that timeline, by being organized is obviously important. But also just remembering that like you have got to press forward in those moments and really stay focused and responsive to those investors until the round closes. Not like it's easy on the other side, but like that period is really specific, or was for me.
Well, Kelly, as you think about the things that were most important to you in your round, you partner, price, and amount of money, and then maybe something else. How would you sort of force rank, having gone through it, sort of what was most important to you?
Like the amount raised, price,
yeah.
Is that? I mean, I think it was really after each conversation, I felt like I learned so much from every investor I talked to that I would take that information and maybe amend the pitch or the deck. So the price of the round, that was actually determined by Audrey as well. She really took the lead. And then the partners, what does that mean exactly?
In other words, like, if you were thinking about, different VCs that participated, assuming that, that female founders was not the only one.
Okay.
Were you, what was your order of preference?
Yeah. Okay, I hear what you're saying now. Yeah, I mean, the people that are involved and behind Lex were really important to me. So I feel like the Female Founders Fund was a really good fit for me as a woman founder, and they're New York based. And then Anu has a really great network of connections that really trust Anu. So once I had Anu on board, I was able to get these introductions, and it kind of just really helped push me through the final last stages. But I was just leaning on that momentum from the partners I was meeting. And then the other side of it is that I did include many small angel investors because I wanted to have queer investors on the deck or in the group. So people that have supported me along the way, like Roxanne Gay was helping promote my Kickstarter.
Mhm.
Her and her partner invested. I took smaller checks from like Tabby, and like I just really wanted to kind of give back and feel like I was surrounded by people that were like behind me and the deal. So I guess partner is number one for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Ben, where were you on that list? Is it a certain amount of money or getting the right people or price?
I don't know. I think it's kind of a mixture, right? Like some investors are just great optically to have on your cap table and can help, you know, signal something even to close the round, right? Just okay, I'll give these guys some small allocation just because I can say, hey, this person's involved, or there's an angel or a small fund, which gives you a bit more credibility. Some people are willing to really roll up their sleeves and help you out and be a resource. Some people have just got a lot of money and maybe they're not going to be that helpful. So I think you need the money. So I think you have to balance it. I don't know. I wouldn't pick one over the other. I think you have to be kind of strategic as you put together the composition of your cap table.
No, and I think that's important too. And I think it's important to sort of think about and maybe to some extent signal to those investors what you're counting on them for. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go to the people who are the big check and say, you guys are just here to be the big check. You don't add any other value. But for everybody else in the round, I think saying like, hey, I'm letting you in because I'm counting on your introductions. I'm counting on, X, Y, and Z, or I'm needing you for this thing is important. Stephany, how did you ultimately decide? And I know what that process is like. Everyone is trying to get in and telling you how much value they'll provide and all of that sort of stuff. And ultimately you had to sort of probably cut some people back, probably maybe take more dilution than you had thought.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the considerations that came up in that situation? And did you cut anybody out?
I did, and it was hard to cut people out that wanted in. It was hard to piece together a cap table. What I would suggest is, what I did, and I think worked, was to say, I'd love you to be a part of this round. Let me come back to you and confirm allocation, whether that was for angels, for syndicates, for the lead. Obviously that was a little bit more clear based on ownership requirements, but that helped not box me into like, so-and-so wants X and I'm going to have to deliver. And if somebody else comes in, so what happened is I actually got 2 like same day yeses in first pitches. And they're like, all right, we're in for 750. And you're like, and part of you's like, holy fuck, that just happened. Part of you's like, what if I never get another yes? I mean, I have to say yes, right? The answer is you want to say yes gracefully, which is like, I'm delighted, I'm honored, thank you. I'm noted that you're interested in 750. What's your, flexibility here? Let me circle back with you on allocation as the round comes together. Because you just don't know. And like, you might want to be like, actually, I'd love $1 million. Can we go a little higher? You might be like, I can't give you more than 200,000. Is that doable? So it's just, there's a lot of like dynamics in play. For me, like, listen, the courting process was unbelievable. I think, again, COVID's timing had a lot to do with this. I had an incredible fund that I love and respect who did end up being in the cap table, but not the lead investor, actually send a team to my house during COVID to bring champagne and a physical term sheet, just like to wow you. Like, people were trying to do anything to win a deal because it's such a weird time, right? Mm-hmm. And so setting aside the emotion, because that felt good. It felt like a proposal. You're like, oh my God, this is happening. And thinking about like, who did I connect with? How can I get back channel feedback? So funds that you've backed, I want intros to meet the founders and I want to know what it's like to work with you. So give me references. I need to think. I'm so grateful for this term sheet. I'm not going to be making a decision tonight. I need to think. And then going and doing your own homework. Like, this is a two-way decision, right? Just because they want you, do you want them? Will they actually take your phone call at midnight? Like, if your CTO walks out the door on you and you're like a couple days from releasing for a customer, like, what are you doing? Are they there for you in those moments? Can they do the things they say they can do? How valuable is their portfolio sort of services for you? Do you care about those things? So really doing some homework. And honestly, I think, like, yes, it's a blanket game to try to get as many convos as you can when you're trying to fundraise. But I did all my homework up front. I knew who I wanted to lead the round if I got there, right? Like, I knew that if this person said I'm in, above all others, that would be my choice. I had my force ranked list. I kept detailed notes. I revisited it all the time throughout the process. And that helped me just pull together, my round and what I wanted. And what I did, which isn't always going to be a choice that everyone has, but I tried to think about lead because I want this stage. And people who lead seed stage maybe lead A's, but they don't lead B's and C's and other things, right? They lead seed for a reason. So who might be in my round as a syndicate who would be capable of leading my A? And how would I think about maybe stacking the deck in my favor with interested investors today who can't lead because I already have a lead, but could be really powerful for being a part of my next round? And how could, as insiders, the cap, I kind of help build that next, leg of fundraising. No guarantees that they lead, but that they're there. And then also similar to what Kelly said, who are the most impactful angel investors? I think Ben said this too, like there's the halo effect of like a name brand person, but then there's the actual benefit of like people who help you. I work my cap table to the bone. I'm like, hey guys, I need an intro. I need a referral. How did you do this? The head of M&A at Stripe is an angel investor, and I'll call him and be like, okay, marketing to developers, go. And I get 30 minutes of like the smartest intelligence and insight you can get. Like the angels are there to help you, right? And yes, it's nice to market that, so-and-so is an investor, but frankly, like I picked based on diversity, gender diversity, underrepresented populations, connection to my industry, roles I didn't have yet. So I have a CFO that's on there, and I call him sometimes before board meetings and like review stuff with him. Like they're there to help you. And then those people want to help make more intros. So it just, if done right, can be a really terrific self-fulfilling prophecy of people who care about you and that want to go the distance. Those people are on your cap table till the day you sell that company, or the day you go public, or the day you go under, whatever direction it goes. And so, pick wisely.
Cool. I want to do a hard stop at 5, so I want to see if I can squeeze in maybe 2, and if they're short, 3 questions. So if anybody in the audience wants to use the little hand raise feature that for 7 months we've all gotten really skilled at on Zoom calls. So if anybody has a question, feel free to raise their hand. If not, I will just, before you go rushing off, nothing has happened in the world since we started this call, just in case you weren't paying attention. We don't know anything more than when we started before this. So, if you're afraid to ask a question because you don't want to delay getting back to the news, that's that you don't have to worry about that. Oh, I see a physical hand raised. Susanna.
Charlie.
Hey there. Okay, 2 questions. Cool.
Yeah, I'd love to ask the team. I think you've given us just such great perspective on product market fit. I would love any further advice you have for actually maybe over 50 founders. I saw that there's a founder here who has a company for people over 60, Belinda. Mm-hmm. But anyway, any thoughts on over 50 and just, I know VCs and investors are looking for unusual companies, but I'm wondering if there's any way to play that up. Thank you, Charlie.
Sure. I'm probably the closest out of all of us, I think. So one thing I would say is just, I'll make a general comment about, is that I one time had a founder reach out to me who was from a community that is not often sort of who you see founded. And somehow I had wound up on some list of founders friendly to this particular group. And the advice I gave is like, look, there are open-minded people and there are people who haven't done the work to sort of check their own biases, and they fall into every walk of life, and VCs and founders and all of that sort of stuff. My recommendation to the founders is tell your story, share why whoever you are the right person to do this thing. And there's no way to kind of game out like, oh, if I just took this angle, like these VCs will be interested in me for this reason, whatever. Like no one ever became a good VC simply by leaning hard or away from any one particular group, right? And so, you know, I've backed a lot of, you know, female founders, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the next female founder in the door starts out with a green light and works their way to red. Like, I'm a default no until I'm a yes on every new deal, no matter who, you know, kind of comes in. So I think it's really in the founder's court to sort of prove out why they are the right person for their particular company. And look, at the age factor is, you know, it cuts both ways, right? Like I know at 22 years old, I didn't feel like I knew anything. And I hope to know a lot more than I do when I'm 50s now. So you know, I think everybody's sort of walk of life is you know, kind of different. And I don't think there's any one way to play it. Atul is in here somewhere with a hand. If you want to unmute.
Hey, Charlie, thank you. So I'm in that well-experienced 50+ club. Charlie, the question is, we are developing an app to engage consumers on greenhouse gas reduction. So we are starting to do a seed round. And, you know, one of the questions that comes up is, you know, are you pre-revenue? Are you post-revenue? So this is, you know, you would think that in a seed round, you know, pre-revenue does not matter, but it does. So the question is to all the three of the founders that have, you know, shared a lot of wisdom. Did those questions come up, particularly from Ben, you know, who's, you know, reached out to 70. So hats off to you, Ben. Would love to get some feedback. Thank you.
Sure. I think, I mean, it's a question that they ask, but again, at the pre-seed and seed stage, if you paint the right picture, you know, not having revenue isn't necessary, shouldn't be a gating factor, right? I mean, these guys are more interested, you know, they're not investing now because they think you're going to make 100K or 500K this year. They're investing now because they think they're going to build a business that's got some massive enterprise value 5 and 10 years down the road. Where revenue can be an indication is, you know, we had a few conversations where we started speaking to an investor, say, we closed down in January this year. So we maybe spoke to someone for the first time in November, and, you know, then by middle of December, we were able to say, hey, we closed our first customer, right? And we were able to show some early traction. The amount of money didn't matter. It was just an indication that we were serious about building a business. But I think if you're speaking to the right kind of investors, they shouldn't be expecting you know, significant amounts of revenue at the pre-seed and seed phase. You should understand this. It's more about the picture you're telling and the opportunity, you know, 3-5 years down the road.
And Stephany, you were probably pre-revenue or you were pre-product when you first got your funding.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are definitely going to get that question, and, you know, being pre-revenue doesn't necessarily mean you aren't started. And so being able to show material progress or how the funding unlocks something that's kind of blocking you. So you've got all the pre-work done, the build starts here because, you know, the funding, but I think, and this goes all the way back to the very beginning of, like, how do you build a budget? You have to have at least a line of sight to what are you going to charge, what's reasonable in the market, and can you make money? I think if you haven't done that work, the believability and viability of an investment gets much harder, even if you're a terrific salesperson or sort of very believable founder.
I think it really also depends on what the big questions about your particular model are. I mean, Kelly, in the dating, at least that was your wedge, right? In the dating world, people spend money. That's not the issue. It's how fast can you build a big audience. So I would imagine that your revenue wasn't nearly as interesting to investors as the speed of your user base.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of dating apps start out just completely focused on getting the amount of users, or social apps. The revenue is the person using it. But at the same time, that I had tested out that people would pay for the personal ads to be posted on the Instagram account was actually like hugely helpful to prove to the VCs this community will in fact pay. So when I introduced $5 charge to have your personal posted on Instagram, 73% of the community paid to post. So I was able to drop these numbers that really like helped color what the potential would be, even though it was like a very crude operation. Like any little bit helped. Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, I just want to thank you both and Stephany too for spending time with us. I know it's been sort of a unusual and stressful week, so I hope everybody was able to sort of take their minds off for a little bit. You know, again, congratulations to everybody for being able to, you know, pull down a round in you know, kind of a very difficult time period, and wish you guys the best of continued success going forward.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, guys.